Meeting to order, and the city recorder will perform a roll call.
Lance Cady,
Aye. Here.
Virginia Cloyd,
Here.
Bob Elliott,
Here.
Kate Lacey. Absent. Josh Port is absent. Tom Wells,
Here.
Mayor Aziz, absent. Counselor Dykstra,
Here.
Counselor Reeskamp,
Here.
Counselor Grizzle,
Here.
Counselor Nassar,
Here.
Counselor Bolin,
Here.
and Counselor Steinhebel.
Here.
Okay, thank you, Kim. All right, first up, we have nominations. The first nomination that we'll entertain is for the Budget Committee Chair. I'll entertain nominations.
I move Jason.
Second.
I guess we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Breaking tradition here. Motion carries. Next up would be a nomination of the Budget Committee Secretary.
I nominate Counselor Nassar.
Ah.
I'll second it.
A motion and a second to nominate Councilor Nassar as the Budget Committee Secretary. All those in approval, say aye.
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 All right, motion carries. Thank you, guys. Okay, next up, approval of the fiscal year 2021 budget minutes. Everyone had a chance to review those.
I move for approval.
I'll second it.
Been moved and seconded to approve the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget minutes. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Minutes are approved. And next up is the presentation of the fiscal year 2021-2022 budget message, and that's Nancy Brewer, interim city manager. Nancy? And Matt Atkin, I'm sorry, our finance director.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am pleased to be here. For those of you who don't know me, I've been the interim city manager since early October. I came from 30 years at the city of Corvallis, 27 of those as the finance director. For me, budget is the best part of everything. It is the happiest time of year. It's always an opportunity to look forward and a little bit of looking back and the opportunity to be proud of some things we've accomplished. And I do have a budget message in the document for you. So I'm just going to summarize that. Like everybody else, we've been hit by COVID-19, the Lebanon community as a whole. We have had illness, we've lost people, we've had businesses, some that have failed outright, a lot that are suffering right now. But I want to applaud the Lebanon community for doing everything that they can to help keep businesses going. They've shopped carefully, they've shopped locally. Curbside carryout has been booming business for a lot of our local restaurants, and that's been beneficial. As an organization, I think we've asked IT to pivot about 47 times in the last year from one priority to another, as we so clearly needed to ramp up our electronic presence as we had to close offices. The latest thing that they're rolling out now will be Zoom hearings and arraignments at municipal court. That's been set up in a secure method that will let us, even in periods like present, let us continue to hold trials, hold arraignments, and meet those needs. Our library and our senior center both pivoted to online. They do YouTube and Facebook classes. If you haven't looked at the Facebook page lately, story time with Darcy yesterday, there you go. They have really outdone themselves, and I have to give a lot of kudos to the senior center for stepping up and helping many of our seniors in the community get vaccinations, both get them scheduled, because it's not been easy. And they've done a lot of transports to the Linn County Fairground to help people get to the fairground to get their vaccines. They have actually gotten kudos from several of the local pharmacies for doing a lot of that work in terms of laying information out, helping people get their vaccination appointments that the local pharmacies then did not have to do. Our economic development catalyst stepped up efforts, working with the chamber and the Downtown Association to get PPE out to businesses. That is something that is continuing even now. They've helped businesses get loans and grants and get the word out about what's available from the federal and the state government. And they've worked carefully with Lynn County when Lynn County got some money that could go locally to help make sure that money was making it into the hands of the local business community. Our HR department, which is small, has taken the opportunity of shutdown to continue advancing a lot of our HR work. They're crafting policies. We've rolled out organizational training and management training programs. Coming up next is going to be FEMLA OFLA training, which I'm sure we're all looking forward to. Though we had originally expected to see a decrease in building construction during the COVID pandemic, it's been anything but that. Our permit office has issued more permits, higher dollar values. There is construction happening all over town, and that's good to see. That's good for the community. A lot of housing going in should help us with our affordable housing work. Our maintenance group has stepped up when OSHA required daily sanitation of bathroom facilities. They require 8-hour sanitation cycles at the jail. So we've seen a lot more presence of maintenance people in the buildings doing a lot of that extra cleaning. And then through it all, our engineering group has continued working on the West Side Interceptor projects so that we are at the point where we are just about ready to get pricing and turn over some shovels of dirt to get started on that project. Really important, really looking forward to that. Some of you have commented already that you like the new budget going to the portrait mode. We liked that too. We thought that made it a little bit easier to read. There are a lot of changes in this budget following on the hard work that Matt has been doing the last couple of years in terms of trying to address some of our financial management issues. We've created some new funds this year. Internal service funds by the Government Accounting Standards Board definition are to fund those operations that really just serve the organization. So HR, city manager, finance, the city recorder's office, city attorney will now be in an administrative services fund. Costs are allocated out to the operating funds based on their proportionate budget. And then we've taken what were special revenue funds, the IT and GIS funds, combined them as an internal service fund. Again, most of their work is done internally. And our custodial and maintenance special revenue fund has been turned into an internal service fund. Through this budget, I am proposing that we rename the maintenance operations department to the public works department. And that's really in recognition that they have moved from maintaining the parks, the streets, the water and sewer lines to also operating the water and wastewater treatment plant. And they've picked up a much broader set of tasks to do. I think the department name change helps reflect that for the entire community. We have a lot of highlights. There is a lot we're expecting to have happen in the coming year, and the budget reflects this. As I noted, the West Side Interceptor, Ron is expecting to have final construction cost numbers later this month. And that's really going to set in motion then a council amendment to the current contract for a general contractor to move to a maximum price for construction. And we will actually start working on the final stages of implementing that long-awaited program, which will be so beneficial to the west and south parts of town. We've noted multiple times we've taken on the wastewater treatment plant. We're getting ready to award a bid for the wastewater treatment plant master plan that needs to be updated now. We expect that's going to take about 2 years to get done. It will have to go through everybody and their brother in terms of regulatory agencies to get it approved. But we think that will give us a pretty good direction on what needs to happen at the plant, both currently, ongoing maintenance, and then what might be needed as the community grows. Kelly Hart and her group will be taking on at some point a comp plan update. We hope to be able to combine that with an update to the community vision and strategic plan, and try to put both of those pieces have public information, public comment opportunities to help set what the future of Lebanon will look like. So we're hoping to put those public interaction sections together. That'll save us some money and save us some time and be able to work through both of those processes. That's clearly going to have to wait until the community can meet as a community group. That's not something that would be easily done via Zoom. It needs to be done in a big room with a lot of people given the opportunity to brainstorm and put some ideas out on the table. We do have library is expanding their library of things that you can check out. A lot of people don't know this about the library. They think books, 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 but they also have a lot of very useful tools that you can check out and use. They are going to be expanding the story walk that was implemented during the pandemic and has proven to be quite popular for parents with kids, that you move from a stand to a stand reading a story, but it gives the opportunity for some exercise in there. And in particular for the littler kids, a picture book type story event can help get them out from underneath the house roof for a little while and run around in the park and play and enjoy that. The Senior Center and Transit Operations expect to be expanding the Lynx service to Brownsville and Scio, hoping that that can go live by September 1st-ish, when kids go back to school, so that we can continue to enhance those services following our transportation plan. We know that our economic development catalyst will be working on post-COVID business recovery plans with our business, trying to help remarket everything, get everybody back open, continue to provide the PPE that they need in order to operate until the all clear is given. There was a little chatter early on. We are implementing an asset management system. We're starting with the wastewater treatment plant, and I think IT is putting their assets in. We expect this, it's a software solution that links tasks with GIS data. It gives us the ability to have a, kind of, here's my daily or weekly maintenance task list at the plant. It will be ultimately what we would use to submit a work order for crews to go out, whether it's to turn somebody's water on or to identify where there's water bubbling up out of the ground. We have a pipe leak or something along those lines. It's an exciting solution because it should help us to assess the state of a lot of infrastructure that's in the ground that we can easily forget exists and that needs to have money invested in it and attention paid. Police department is looking at upgrading their radios, but they're also looking at kind of their entire technology solution, their vehicle cameras, their on-body cameras, the consoles for the dispatch center. All of those are aging out, so they're trying to work on a plan that will make sure everything works together and is interoperable. We have budgeted, and I'll mention this again when we do urban renewal, but we're budgeting to bring a consultant in to help us look at the North Gateway Urban Renewal District to see there's a minor expansion we'd like to look at to include a couple of blocks of 5th Street that are north of Tangent that are not currently in that plan, but 5th Street needs to be replaced. And we think that it could provide also the ability to do some traffic enhancement at the 5th and Tangent intersection if we can make that work, as well as look at whether or not they could fund a new City Hall on the Academy Square block. It will require some investigation. We expect that we would come back to council with information about the impact, what that would mean, and be able to make a decision. As we note in the budget message, we have budgeted salary increases. People are budgeted for their step increases when they are expected to occur. We have a 1.4% COLA budgeted that matches the CPI that is in effect for the AFSCME agreement. We've budgeted that same 1.4 for the police department. They are in negotiations. We don't know what will come out of that. Don't know at this point if that will be done before July 1st. So that will need to be addressed as that comes through. I am proposing one new position for the organization, and that is to add an administrative position for the renamed Public Works Department. I think with taking on all of the purchasing that's happening for the plants, the maintenance calls, the parks calls, it's more than we can accomplish with the 2 staff that we have currently doing that work here in community development, and also attend to their community development plan review work that they need to do. So it is my recommendation to add that new position. All of that leads me to the future and where we see the organization going in the not too distant future. As we know, this budget is balanced, but it is making use of fund balance to make that happen in the general fund. That is not sustainable on an ongoing basis. We can't guarantee we're going to have that fund balance to draw upon year after year. So we will plan on spending some time over the next year working on how to address that in terms of what we can garner in efficiencies. Are there some revenue alternatives that we are missing? Looking at fee structures and some of those kinds of things. Like every other community out there, we have infrastructure needs that are not currently being met. A lot of that is more visible in street needs, and in particular local streets. We don't get state money for doing local streets, but also what's invisible: water and sewer lines, laterals, dealing with infiltration and inflow. All of those are areas that need additional funding. We are looking at grant opportunities through the state, through federal, American Rescue Plan monies that may come or become available for doing some infrastructure maintenance. We're really working as much as we can to issues. We continue to have rising parks operating costs. That is still general fund supported. We are getting trails added. Build Lebanon Trails is working to implement the Old Mill Trail, and they're great, but the maintenance of that is going to fall to the Parks Department, and that does increase our ongoing operating costs. So that's one we're trying to figure out how to deal with, and where we can leverage additional revenue for parks. As you all know, camping, illegal camping is a challenge. There is action at the from federal court levels, from district courts. There's action at the legislature. There are several bills that have been moving at the legislature that would provide some guidelines on what local governments can and cannot do in terms of providing camping, providing shelter options, some guidelines on allowing recreational vehicles or car camping in parking lots that are authorized for that. So we will have the first meeting next week of the ad hoc committee working on illegal camping to start looking at our local codes and what we're going to need to do to make sure we are in line with those court decisions and with what's coming out of state law, and to see where we go from there. But I think ultimately we're going to need a coalition of the nonprofit service providers coming together then to work on a solution that's more permanent. We do have included in the budget American Rescue Plan funding. We've been notified preliminarily will be just a little bit more than $3.5 million will be coming to Lebanon. That is included in the general fund in the non-departmental budget right now. The rumor has it that Treasury guidance on what we can do with that money will come out next week, the 11th or 12th. And until we see that guidance, we are not prepared to apply that money to any particular program or opportunity. Once we get the guidance, we'll start working on what we might recommend doing with that resource. I can tell you we probably can spend it 6 or 7 times over, but it's one-time money, and it can't go for basic operating costs. So we'll be working on that in the coming month or so. And then finally, the question that's on everybody's lip switch is, what will normal look like? And the answer is, we aren't really sure. We hope to get back to normal sooner rather than later. I will say we've got some staff members who have really appreciated the opportunity to work remotely, the ability to turn off the distractions of the office, people stopping by to ask questions, phone calls, running in and out of meetings. The ability to sit down at home and focus on some specific tasks has been really beneficial. They have been very, very productive that way. So I would expect that we would continue to have some remote work happening into the future. But I think for the most part, we are hoping that we get back to normal we open our doors wide to the public to come and use our facilities. I know the library is chomping at the bit. The senior center, I think we ask about every month, we ask the governor's office, when will guidance for reopening the senior center become available? And about every month they say, oh, we're working on it. It'll probably be available next month. And I'm about due to send them another reminder saying, when will the senior center be able to reopen, or what's the guidance for doing that? And we know that that is in high demand among our senior population, to be able to get back together, to start attending group meals instead of having them delivered at home, the ability to connect with our friends outside of this electronic means, or a telephone call, or a masked conversation over the fence, will be something we are all looking forward to. And with that, I will tell you that I have not asked the department directors to do presentations this year. We are all available to answer questions. And any questions that you have about the organization, we are happy to answer. And in the meantime, I'm going to turn it over to Matt to sum up any the numbers out of the budget. I'm free to answer questions anytime you have them. Thank you.
Great report, Nancy.
Thank you.
Well, and I think based on the agenda, I think we'll do the public comment section, and then we'll jump into the presentation of department budgets. But as of this point, I am not aware of any submitted public comment. I don't know if,
Kim, did we
Kim,
have,
if you received any that I didn't receive.
I have not received any.
Neither have I.
okay, well, with that, I guess we can kick it back to you, Matt.
All right. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's do this one. So this is page 22 of the budget document. Unfortunately, it doesn't show me exactly what you guys can see on here. And so I hope you see kind of the same version that I see. But this just goes into the budget and financial overview, give a short introduction, go into some of the local economy stuff. A lot of it's the same information that Nancy shared. You know, we provided some good grants with the COVID-19 pandemic. We continue to look for opportunities to help people and use the funds that we're getting from the federal government. And then we kind of go into a broad overview of our budget. And so this broad overview is saying that our budget is increasing by about 16% to $73.5 million. A lot of that increase is just carrying over projects that we've had that are either growing in size, or it's increasing some because we are getting some of our transfers back, as you'll see as we talk about the internal service funds. But overall, our operating budget is 140, or not 100, just 41,800,000. It's about 25% more than last year. And a lot of this is related to those transfers that we've talked about in previous years. So this gives a good overview of kind of where we're seeing the increases at. For revenue, we see increases in taxes, licenses, and permits, which also includes our franchise fees. I will let you know next year we're looking at kind of updating how we show this so that we can get some different detail in there. We'll have a franchise fee line that's by itself. But as you come look at the operating expenses, we've got a large increase in our personnel costs. That's just kind of the nature that we live in. We've got increasing costs due to salaries, but also benefits, PERS costs. The materials and services, the reason why this one looks like it's going up so much is this is where we've put the 3.5 million of the American Rescue Funds. And so that's where that piece is coming in. The capital outlay, this is mainly to do with the West Side Interceptor, but then also the work that we need to do out at the wastewater treatment plant is where a lot of that increase comes in. From there, you'll see the transfers out are increased, and we'll get into that in a little bit more detail as we go into that. Our debt principal's up, our interest is down. That's kind of how it works. When we pay off some of the debt, our interest goes down. And then our contingencies are up from last year, and our unappropriated balances are up. We've got some graphs here. Overall, as we looked at property taxes, we looked at the amount that we received this year. We increased that by 3%. And a difference between last year and this year is we increased our collection rate back up to our standard 93%. So that way we can recognize more of that property tax revenue that we're getting in. We initially thought last year we might see a decrease, so we decreased it last year. We didn't end up seeing that decrease.
So Matt, I have a question.
Yeah.
Down there at the bottom of, or at the next last paragraph on that page, it says, this assumption was due to federal programs that allowed the deferral of mortgage payments for up to a year. We never saw the decrease in property tax collections. Does that mean that this year or next year we can anticipate that the property tax collections will decrease?
You know, we're thinking that that's not going to happen based on what we saw this year. Is we would have assumed maybe some of those payments wouldn't have been made throughout last year. I mean, the pandemic started in, March, April. It wasn't very long before the federal government said they were going to allow you to kind of wait on paying your mortgage. And so we thought at that point, if there were going to be people that did that and didn't make those mortgage payments, we wouldn't have seen their either escrow company make their property tax payments on time at that point. We didn't see any of that happening. We actually saw more property tax come in than normal during that period. And so I think going forward, we're confident that we're still going to get our property tax payments. And so it's not something that we've budgeted a decrease in this year.
Okay, all right.
One of the other areas is our lodging tax has decreased, our transient lodging tax. We had hotels that were closed for parts of the year. We're hoping that they'll get back to normal business. It's probably going to take more than this year, but we have budgeted an increase in what we did last year. We learned this year due to a new House bill in Oregon that we're going to be limited on the amount of shared revenue for marijuana tax. And so we've decreased the amount of that shared revenue, and then we've left the city's local tax at the same rate that we've been collecting it. System development charges are all dependent on growth in community development. We've seen a lot, so we've seen a lot of money come in system development charges over the years, and we're looking to see an additional amount of that come in this year. I know some of our larger projects have already paid theirs, but we anticipate there to be some additional building throughout the year. I guess from you guys, how much detail do you want me to give you on each of these? It's here written. I can go into it in more detail. I think the biggest one I covered with the property tax. I'm happy to go through each one if that's what the committee prefers.
Does anyone have a preference on that? I know we've received it, had a chance to look through it and read it. I
I'm
think
a
the
no.
The plan was to kind of go more with direct questions from the committee if they had questions on certain department budget items, Matt.
Okay, so I will just kind of roll through this then. If there's
Just one-
any specific quote, go
Can I
ahead,
say-
Lance.
So what is our fiscal year? Is our fiscal year the same as the calendar year, or is it a July 1st year, or when does the
It's-
fiscal year begin?
The fiscal year begins July 1st and goes through
Oh.
June 30 of the following year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so with that, I'm just gonna go straight into the general fund. You can see the general fund budget has increased from 13 million up to 18 million. A large part of that, $3.5 million, is due to the ARP money that we're getting. You can see that we've removed the city manager's office, HR, city attorney. Previously, we had removed public works, or what we now call public works. We've added one that's mayor and city council. So those are the things that you kind of direct us in what we're paying for in certain areas. We removed parks last year, but this year we've also removed finance and legislative, and we've renamed legislative when we get to the administrative internal service fund, city recorder. Other than that, there aren't a lot of changes. Community development increased. And I think this is due to the grant that we received for housing rehabilitation. And so that's why that number is increased. As well, if you guys remember back to last year's budget, we had allocated salaries across several funds. We've kind of mesh that down a little bit so that way it's easier to see where people are paid from. Police department's budget is actually slightly less than last year's. You can see the non-departmental has increased significantly, and that is where the ARP money is at. So we've kind of already gone through some of the revenue questions, so we'll move into, like I said, city managers and the other departments. Same with HR, mayor and council budget. Here's the stipends, and then there's some advertising, some dues and subscriptions, some city grants, some meetings, computer expenses. And so as I go through these, if you guys have any questions, please stop me and we'll discuss them further. The finance department was moved. The municipal court is still here. We've got our 3 staff that we fund through here. And then we've got the materials and services, and we've removed all the pass-throughs to a non-operating position, as they're just money we get in that we turn around and send either to the state or the county. So that's where that's decreased. City recorders is also in the administrative services. Library got some increase in salaries, which is pretty consistent across the board with other departments. Then we've got pretty much just the normal costs. We've had some maintenance cost decrease. The community development department. Again, we've got contract services for a CDBG grant that increased this significantly. Moving into the police department, personnel budgets currently remaining the same. We consistently have budgeted high. You can see from the budget to the estimate, there's usually some leftover, so we've kept it the same in hopes that we get closer to our budgeted number. Otherwise, most of the other costs are pretty much in line with prior year. We've got some of these equipment purchases that we're going to make. Not a lot of changes there. Senior Center, a lot of the highlights are written in here for you. We do have an increase in personnel, and that's based on some of the allocations that we've done with the people that work in there. And that's because in the prior year, we had a piece of 3 different employees that were both budgeted in Senior Center and in the Links Transit Fund. So some of those have come back here, and as they work in Links, their salaries will be then coded there.
I do have a question.
Yep.
I don't know if this is complete. Is traditionally and historically their budget always been so low?
For the senior
Yes.
services?
Uh-huh.
Yes. There's the director, there's a program, I forget what program, yes, the person who does all the programming, and then they've got a half of a person for a front desk person. And that's where it's been at. I think maybe this year we added the 0.5. So before the 2018, 2019 year, they only had 2 people. They didn't have that front desk person. That's their halftime.
Okay, I made a note of the word, I put the word magic on it because they make a lot happen with so little budget.
Well, they have a lot of volunteer work too.
Okay. So non-departmental, you'll see that some of the audit expense and computer expense has been removed. Those have ended up in the finance department, which is in the next fund that we'll talk about. You can see the 3.8 million for contract services. This is where the ARP money is. A lot of the other costs that we moved into other places to more accurately reflect who kind of has the authority to make those purchases. And then we've got some improvements down here, which are for getting fiber to City Hall. We need to replace that. There was another 30,000 in, I think 32,000 in some repairs for the exterior of City Hall to fix some water issues that we've had. And then, I'm trying to remember, got 100,000 in there as well. I'm sorry, while I pull up this other page for myself. There it is. That's for a fuel station. I know there's going to be some discussion on that as the fire district is no longer offering a fuel station, and the city has since turned to Pacific Pride. There's been some desire to have a city-owned fuel station so that if there is some type of emergency situation, we have access to the fuel that we need.
Can you
Then
help us
moving
out
into
with
the
that duplication as well?
Excuse me?
The duplication line item, can you help me out with that?
So the duplication line item is for pretty much the copy machines here at City Hall that span a multiple of departments. And so that's where they put in, those are things that as we go forward, we're gonna look at changing and allocating in a different method as well.
Got it, thank you.
Yep. Moving to non-operating, here's where you'll see some of the municipal court fees, the Lebanon Community School District, CT, and then the Lynn County Transit tax that we collect. Those come in, those go out. We've separated them out. We've got our transfers out. Here's where we're showing where we're sending the money to. Earlier in the budget, there's a spreadsheet that kind of lists out each transfer and why it's there and how much is going from where to which fund as well. We've got a small loan and some police vehicle leases that are being paid out of the general fund as well. And then our working contingency and our operating contingency, which both meet the fiscal plan or fiscal policies that the city has. Any questions on the general fund before I move on? Okay. So the Administrative Services Fund, this is where a lot of the departments that we removed out of the general fund have gone. Felt it would be easier to see these in one area instead of see them across multiple funds. So you can see the revenue is pretty much all transfers in or intergovernmental revenue from the Urban Renewal Agency. We've got the city manager's office. You'd have to go back and look at the general fund for the correlating prior years. And some of those are hard to compare because, like I said, last year we had them split across several funds. But these are pretty consistent with where we've been at. So city manager's office, human resource office. Currently, we've got a temp position that's also budgeted in here for a 1-year term. City attorney, that hasn't changed. City recorder, nothing really has changed. Finance department, you can see we've got some increased contract services. That's where the audit fees and the ERP software that we have is budgeted out of now.
Hey, Matt,
Yes.
quick question on the city attorney stuff. Is
Yep.
the city attorney strictly contractual, or is that considered an employee? Because I'm curious about the fringe benefits budget amount.
So it is a contractual. We don't just employ Trey. We actually consult with his firm to provide us with the services.
Right.
And so we don't have the fringe benefits related with that.
So what is that 95,750 then?
Where
That's
I
city
guess-
recorder.
Yeah, so right up here at the very top is the city attorney. It's pretty small. We've got 205 for their contract, and then we've got an additional 25,000 for outside attorney fees.
Oh, I'm sorry.
we
I
can't use
was
Trey.
reading the line below there. Yep.
Yep,
No worries. It was just jumped the page on my screen. Thank you.
no worries. So then we've also got some transfers out here, both for the other internal service funds and then also for our PERS bond that we have to pay. And so just so you guys are aware, we started by allocating out the custodial internal service fund to all other funds. And then we did the IT or the information services. And then the admin services was the last one that we then allocated. So that's why you'll see that we're sending money to both of those in the admin services. So then moving to information technology, you can see some of the great stuff that Brent and his guys do. Truly without our IT department, we'd all be sunk. As I'm sure you guys know as well, as we do these council meetings electronically. So currently we've get about 30 grand from the fire district for providing them with IT services. And then we get some property rent that might go away if we finish a transaction with the consumer power for them to operate our tower. and for us to just have the ability to use it. Then we've got transfers in from all the departments. Salaries look a little bit higher than what we're used to, but that's because we've combined the GIS and the IT into one. And so you'll see that covers all of our guys right here. I don't know why it says 3.9. I think that's a typo. It should be 4, and I'll have to fix that. Trying to think. If you guys have any questions, please let me know.
Matt, I do have a question. So one of the things on page 59, it talks about offsite backups to the cloud are also a key operating cost. And I don't know how much that gets paid for it, et cetera. But I have become increasingly aware of the fact that things just suddenly disappear, especially when dealing with our friends Google. And I'm not just sure that I sometimes trust the cloud as far as offsite storage. And I know that you can buy a 4 terabyte hard drive for about $150 just for my local computer. And it strikes me that perhaps we could internalize our as I say, I don't know what the annual cost is of cloud storage, but and I'm not facile with this information, so I don't really know how it all works. But would it be possible to cut our expenses a little bit by going internally with our memory? As I say, 4 terabytes is a whole bunch of data. And as I say, you can buy that for $150 retail. And so it just makes me wonder whether or not we might be able to internally store that data.
I think I'll let Brent kind of answer that question.
Yeah, there's consumer backups, Lance, and then there are enterprise level backups. And so right now we do back up everything locally. One of the big concerns is if we get crypto lockered or ransomware, what an attacker would do is come in and they would lock all of the data. And at that point, there have been many attacks which have also been able to lock backups and render them inoperable. If we have a physical attack or a physical issue where our data center is no longer accessible, it's critical for the operations of the city that we have the ability to keep this data in a location where we can access it. And so there are SLAs in place. We also are not like just doing this unilaterally in the cloud. I share some of your same concerns with Google, which is why right now city has no paid storage in Google, and our email addresses, all that data is in the Microsoft 365. They have what's called a Gov Cloud, and right now we're on a Gov Cloud for Zoom as well. And so those go through certain levels of review and auditing to make sure that federal and state and local agencies have some assurance that the data that they are backing up is going to be in a place that is, it has got the controls in place that we do have assurance that it will be there when we need it. And so regarding costs, you're right, the costs are astronomically different. The costs right now that we're going to pay or currently are paying is just a little over $1,000 a month. So we're looking at probably $12,000 a year. What we are saving in that, though, is the management. So we have, and I have personally purchased, 2, 3, 4 terabyte hard drives that are USB 3 that plug into our equipment, just to get us by in a pinch. The problem becomes management. you back up police data or secure confidential data. You start backing it up to these devices. You have to manage it. You have to make sure that those are restorable. We have to keep track of them. In a lot of cases, this stuff is, it's evidence. And so there are additional protocols we have to go through. And so what we're doing also is we're buying software that helps us manage that. And when we're dealing with, like, we have probably 60 terabytes of data that we're backing up. So once you start spanning multiple USB drives, it's like having, back in the 90s, you would have 100 floppies to back all your stuff up on, and it just becomes a confused mess at that point. And
Well,
so,
you're the expert at this, and I'm certainly not. But I was just making an observation because, as I said, I had no idea how much we were spending per month
you bet.
to access the cloud. And I say I'm less and less trustful of the cloud because
Sure.
they've lost all kinds of things that I thought I had safely put away, and
Sure.
or they have disappeared them. I'm not sure which is which, but
No, understood. Understood.
But that bothers me.
Yes, I understand. It is a shared concern. And so one of our concerns is security, and another concern is redundancy. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to take a layered approach. So understanding there's no one thing that will fix everything. And so we're trying to say, all right, we need to back up locally. Let's back up in the cloud as well. And for security as well, we need to have multiple things as well as trained staff in order to help protect us. But you're right, it is a large expense. The agencies that I have attended conferences with, like our CIS, who's our insurance provider, my understanding from them is that the average cost for an agency to recover from a security breach is about $2.5 million. And so the cost and the impact to the city if we do lose this or we do have a breach is it's not a small cost. And
Yes,
so
I understand.
always trying to balance that.
Okay. I was just asking the question because I looked at that and I thought, wow, that's a key operating cost. Maybe there's some way to alter that.
Yep, understood. Thank you for asking the question.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you for the information.
Too much.
Well, it just when I have something that has just gone away, I always wonder, is it something I did or how did that happen? And as I say, I'm not a computer, pardon the expression, nerd, but my expertise is otherwise, and so I need to ask those questions. So thanks for the info.
Thank you. Absolutely, and I'm absolutely happy to answer any additional questions you have.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions on IT? Okay. Custodial. Once again, transfers in are where we get the revenues. And then we've got our personnel. And we've got Public Works is the department. And you can see our cost has actually gone down. Part of that is we hired one of the temp or the contract workers that we had, and so that cost has come down, but our other costs have increased due to that. Any questions there? Okay, now we're going to go into our general obligation bond fund, property tax collections, bond principal and interest payments. We're receiving some money from the wastewater fund to pay the portion. This was a bond that got refinanced with part of a full faith and credit bond and part of a general obligation bond. this will be the last year the wastewater fund makes any payment in here. Full faith and credit bond. This had a piece that came from water, wastewater, and the Northwest Urban Renewal area. We've made some corrections due to the state telling us we need to report it differently. So the amount coming from the Urban Renewal District is now an intergovernmental instead of a transfer. The water fund has a transfer in as well, and the debt payments for the expenses. Pension obligation bond. These are transfers in from all funds that have employees, and then the payment that goes with it.
Okay, I have a question.
Yep.
I have a question. On page 74, there's a footnote which says that the 2025 principal was callable in 2010, and the city exercised this call. And as a result, the total pension obligation bonds went from $385,000 a year to $48,000 a year in 2025. I looked at that and that stuck out like a sore thumb, and I thought, I don't understand what went on there. So could you explain that to me?
Yeah, so sometimes when the city puts out debt, there's specific call dates that you have. And so you can call and you can pay off that principal early. And so this specific debt had a lot of specific issues, and each one of these years was a different bond per se, or was for a different time period. And so the amount that was due in 2025 had a provision that we could actually pay it off early in 2010. And so we paid it off early that year, but you can see that the additional 2026, 2027, and 2028 amounts were still outstanding. So we still owe principal or interest on that amount.
Okay.
And so that's where the 48,000 in interest is coming.
Okay. But I presume that since those were callable and you called them and canceled that debt or paid it off, did that debt have to be renegotiated then? Did you refinance that debt?
No, that was just one of the provisions of the original debt agreement.
Okay, so it just flat got paid off.
Correct. That
Okay.
year's.
Okay. All right. That's what I was trying to figure out there. How come that number changed so dramatically from one year to the next? All right. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, moving into the water utility fund. So there's a lot going on here. See, a majority of our revenue comes from charges for service. The other significant portion is other sources, which really is beginning balance. So we had our increase in our fees that increased things about $150,000. You can now see that community development is going to be represented in our utility funds as a separate department. So it's easier to track their overall costs across the city. So of the 3 people there, there's about 0.41 full-time employee equivalent. Go through some pictures. Then you've got Public Works. Public Works is consisting of both the water treatment plant and the maintenance of our water utility lines. And so we used to have 2 different things that would kind of be separate. We've put those together. They're both right here. You can see overall the costs have decreased from last year, and the reason for that is we also broke out engineering, so it's in its own department as well. Overall, as we get down towards the bottom, you can see the total amount budgeted last year is very similar to the total amount budgeted this year across the fund in total.
Okay,
Tom Wells here.
Okay,
I'm just curious, with all the move to electronic and digital, why you're not offering a paperless motion for your utility bills? For me, I get that in the mail every month and it's just a waste of the paper and the postage.
well, people can sign up to do it electronically. They have to go in on our website, and there's the ability to go there and then request to have an e-bill, and then you won't receive that paper copy anymore. But we've made that an option per customer.
Okay, I apparently have never seen that because is that in the payment side or someplace else?
That should be in the payment side, and I will make a note that we should do kind of like an advertising campaign to encourage that.
That would be good because I think there's a lot of us that didn't know that existed.
Okay.
okay, and then I have a question. Here
Okay.
we go. So, way back at the beginning of I don't recall on which page, it talks about big expenses coming up for the upcoming year. One is for the west, for the west side interceptor, and I presume that's for the sewage treatment or sewage access to that lower Stoltz Hill area. Is that true or is that not true?
So one of the things it says here is we're going to spend about $750 on the Walker Road water line replacement, which is going to be done in conjunction with the West Side Interceptor project. We're going to have the road ripped up.
But that West Side Interceptor project, that is sewage access for that lower Stoltz Hill area. Is that correct?
Well, technically it's there's a lot of different things. It's overall to provide a large enough collector pipe so that the capacity within the current collector pipe that we have decreases, and so we don't have any spills. But it will also open up some new area in the city for sewer access.
Okay, well, in the part about large expenditures for the city that need to be priced out and all that sort of thing, there's the comment about the traffic signal project, the Stoltz Hill, the Airport Road traffic signal project, and that's listed at $1.1 million. And I looked at that and I thought, wow, for traffic signal, is there that much development going on down in Lower Stoltz Hill that needs to be done pronto? Because every time I drive past there, it doesn't seem like there's ever anybody coming off Stoltz Hill. And so
well, you must not drive there a lot because I am always waiting in line at Stoltz Hill.
Oh, is that right? Okay,
all the time. That has to do, Lance, with the new development going in across the road as well. Part of the transportation requirement for that from the impact study was that a signal go in because there will be a significant amount of vehicles coming out of the new
subdivision back there.
Yeah, it's not a subdivision, but it's the veterans housing and the
Crossroads.
No, it's what's the name of that?
Applegate Landing.
Thank you.
Applegate.
Okay, well then somewhere in here, and I don't recall exactly where, it indicated that developer had quote unquote donated $100,000 toward that project. Elsewhere, it says that there's the Primrose Avenue extension, which is billed at $400,000 or something like that. That developer donated significantly more, like 200 and 220 or something like that, to that. And I just wondered why one developer was able to donate. I'm making the numbers up because I don't remember exactly what they were, but one's able to donate 20%, and one ended up donating almost 30%. And so as I say, I'm not sure about the accuracy of my two numbers.
Ron,
so let's have Ron come on and talk about this project because he lives and breathes it.
Sure.
Okay,
So,
okay.
so let's start with Airport Road Stilt Hill traffic signal. So as a condition of development, the developer, Applegate Landing, was required to pay for 25% of the signal cost. So that's
Okay,
just the traffic signal itself, right? So
all right.
we've got I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the project's roughly in the million one. We don't have a final on it yet, but that includes quite a bit of other work that the city's going to do there. So we're going to extend water and sewer down Stoltz Hill and connect into Antioch down there, just so we're not tearing that up again.
Sure, for
We're
sure.
going to do sidewalks from that intersection back to 7th Street. So that's the reasoning behind that. So Applegate was also required to fund in full all of the north leg of Stoltz Hill Road. So they were only required to do 25% of the signal. The remaining portion of that's going to be done with city funds. It's an SDC eligible project, so system development charges and transportation. So we're paying for roughly 50% of the signal, and Lynn County, we've got an IGA that goes to the city council this next week that will they will pay for 25% of the signal on the Stoltz Hill side, since they have jurisdiction in that. So that kind of deals with that. As far as the Primrose, so that's another development-driven project. If we go back to roughly the year 2000, when the little strip mall was put in back there, one of the conditions on the strip mall was to construct that section of Primrose Street behind them. With the exception that the city of Lebanon does not start what's called now the Cheetah Lake URD, at which time the Cheetah Lake URD was going to do that, and it never happened. And we never pushed that because there's never been any reason for it to. So what we're doing here, the developer will, all the utilities are in there, the developer will extend utility services to that site, and the city and the developer, as a condition of development, will split the cost of the roadway. We don't even have a number on that yet, as we're still going through the planning phase. So the 400,000 you see there, whatever that number was, somewhat of a placeholder. I would say that that's fairly close, but that's the reasoning behind that.
Okay. I was just asking the question because I didn't understand how all happens. Thank you.
Ron, Tom Wells.
Hi, Tom.
If memory serves me, last year there was budget allocation for the demolition of the water plant.
Correct.
And this traffic signal at Stoltz Hill. Did we make any money on interest? Did that money ever get allocated, or how does that all work?
So when we would typically, we budgeted a little bit of money last year for the demolition of the water treatment plant. So one of the first things we did was hire an environmental consultant to go in and look for any, let's say, asbestos, lead, so on and so on. We found a little bit of asbestos. It's been abated. So no, to answer your question, that money stays with the funds. So it would generate whatever interest, government rate interest is. Same thing with Stoltz Hill Road. We have to budget that out and not knowing exactly when the project's going to go. And of course, we're under design, so we are spending some funds there. Does that make sense?
Yep, I was just curious because I'd seen them in last year's budget.
Yeah, it stays. It doesn't. It's not a use or lose. It stays with the project, and it continues to get interest at some probably measly amount, but it doesn't go anywhere.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Ron, while you're there, it's Bob Elliott.
Hi, Bob.
Hey, with the West Side Interceptor coming through, is there any chance of widening of the Walker Road through there, or what's the plan there?
Yeah, so Walker Road gets a complete reconstruction from 6th Street to Stoltz Hill Road. By the time we're done down there, we'll have it so destroyed that we'll have to rebuild it. So that's part of the project. You'll notice that we have water money coming out of water in there. The existing water line that's in there is an asbestos cement line that's, I want to say 40 to 45 years old. Doesn't make sense to go in and do a complete street reconstruction and leave a garbage water line in. So we'll replace the water line. All new sidewalks, none of the sidewalks or access ramps on all of Walker Road meet current ADA standards. And as soon as we touch it with any kind of construction work, we're required to upgrade all that to ADA. So that it's going to get a full reconstruction. It's not going to be wider, I will tell you that. There won't be any parking on Walker Road when we're done. Part of the new stormwater regulations that are coming out require us to treat 100% of the surface area of a roadway. So where we had parking before is all going to be taken up in bioswales in order to meet treatment standards through DEQ. So that's another big thing that's coming with that, but it will be rebuilt and drivable.
Okay, appreciate the information, Ron.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I'm gonna move back into the presentation if there's no more comments. You guys see the budget again? Just want to make sure before I start moving.
Nope.
And Matt, I do have a question, Mr. J here. I was just wondering, some of the areas and departments have small advertising budgets. Can you help me out with that? What that really is, why some do, why some don't, and what that is?
Absolutely. A majority of that is departments that have it usually have to do some type of formal public notice process. And so we pay for newspaper advertisements to notice the community. We did one for the budget committee meeting. We have to put out a notice that says, hey, on this date, we're going to do this budget committee meeting. We're going to talk about these things. Here's the related information that you might need. There are a number of required notices that we put out, and that's the majority of what any of those are.
And it's better to budget it out per department rather than globally?
It gets difficult when you talk about trying to do it globally of who's going to spend that money and how much they're going to spend. Usually as a department, you kind of have an idea of, okay, I've got a budget committee notice and I've got a budget hearing notice that I have to do. And I might say, oh, I also know I'm going to do this other thing, so I need one other notice throughout the year. So it's a little easier for a department to know how much it is. And that's why it's budgeted out that way.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. So let's see, we went through this. Let's just finish up the water fund. We've got the transfers out. We've got some principal interest payments, a reserve for future equipment replacement. Here's a debt schedule of what we're going to be paying out in that fund as well. Storm drainage. You can see we did our increase. It brought in an additional 15,000 from last year. We've got our public works budget, and then we've got our engineering budget. We've got the transfers out for those things needed, contingency, a reserve for replacement. You see we did increase our budget pretty significantly from last year. That's because some projects didn't get done in the previous year, and we can now do those. Wastewater fund. See, we had about $175,000 increase in fees from what council approved. We've got the state loan amount. You can see we didn't get any of this yet for this year. We did refinance one of our bonds, which you can see here wasn't originally budgeted, but we've got the 14 million again budgeted next year. We've got our community development expenses. We've got our public works expenses, our engineering expenses, and our other costs, you can see this is where the West Side Interceptor project is and under our capital projects. Some debt payments that are coming off. And then as these payments come off, we're going to see the payments for the new debt get added back. And you can see our budget actually went down a little bit from the previous year, having the full project budgeted. We've spent hundreds of thousands at this point doing design and stuff for the West Side Interceptor. So that's where part of that comes in at. Any questions on the wastewater fund? Okay. Motel tax fund. You know, it's been up and down the last couple of years for this as we have had the pandemic start and had revenues drop. They didn't drop as significant as we might have thought. And so that's a good thing. We're expecting, based on our current year estimate, that those will increase another 33% into next year. It kind of allows us to get back to our normal amount with the chamber, and then also some city grants that we have done in the past, including the Downtown Lebanon Association. Any questions here? Going into the building fund, this is all driven by development. So you can see the revenues fluctuate between years. And so we do our best to conservatively estimate what we're going to get. We've got the community development department that does all of this work, and our building contractor is in this contract services line. Overall, it's budgeted as an increase because we've seen so much work. There's going to be additional requirements that we have there. Any questions? Park operations. You can see we've got some fees that come in, an agreement with the school district that clearly didn't get relabeled into intergovernmental, which I'll work on. The amount from the general fund did increase by over $100,000 between last year and this year. The costs have increased. And let's see, we've got kind of overall just increasing because of the administrative services, the PERS bond, and the information systems. So this is where a majority of our increase comes from that required the additional funds from the general fund. Any additional questions?
Quick question. Is there any implementation on trying to bring more, to generate more revenue from our parks and camping, anything like that? Or are we counting on some of the other departments to help bring some of those revenues in?
You know, I know we've had some discussions about some areas where we could hopefully try and generate some more revenue from like Cheetah Lake and some of those things. I don't know that we've got anything in place that moving forward that we're specifically working on. Jason, if you've got any comments that you know, Jason Williams.
Yeah, I think right now we're just trying to get out of the pandemic and get back to regular rentals in the facilities. That's one of the areas you'll notice a big drop off in revenue. So I think if we can get there, then we can start strategizing moving forward on how to be more sustainable.
Any other questions on that? Okay. So the state foot and bike path, this is, it's a small fund. This is 1% of the gas tax revenue that we get in that has to be spent on either foot or bike paths. This would include sidewalks, bike lanes. You can see the amount that we get is not much and is very easy to use up in many of the different projects that we have. I think the last time we used it, last fiscal year, we did some ADA ramps. Any questions on this? Engineering development review. This is another one that's very dependent on development. As people come in and want to develop land, our engineering department goes out and makes sure everything's connected right, done correctly to meet city code. We've got personnel expenses and a little bit in materials and services, and then some costs for admin, IT, and the PERS bond. Any questions? Streets. Majority of our street funding comes from the state gas tax revenue. It came in higher than we were expecting this year due to the pandemic. As everything stopped, we weren't sure how that was going to come in. They're projecting that it will increase, and I also believe the gas tax amount will be increasing slightly. We have a $45,000 from the general fund that helps to pay for the street lights. And then we've got our public works and our engineering departments that are there. A lot of the increase here is from the ability to do some projects this year with this almost $350,000. Is there any questions on the streets? Okay, transit. Transit funds, we've got a lot from the state transit tax that's kind of helped us and allowed us to increase our services. And that's the goal this year, is to increase services, as Nancy talked about earlier. We've got an increase in, I believe, 3 part-time drivers that will help to sustain that increase. Other than that, costs are pretty similar. We are looking at getting some new vehicles, which we get grant money to help fund. Are there any questions? Okay. The Surface Transportation Program Fund, this one, we're actually transferring the money to the Streets Capital Projects Fund. So we kind of move all these things into one area. So we've budgeted an amount that will just be transferred. So I'm assuming there's no questions. Boat Ramp Fund, we get some state grant money that helps us to maintain our boat ramps both at Cheetah Lake and at Gills Landing. And so we get the money in and we use that money to expend on the maintenance. We also have some beginning balance from the federal grant money to help us replace the dock that washed downstream at Gills Landing. So that should be done in the next fiscal year. The next 3 funds are some donation funds for both police, library, and senior center. These are when citizens want to help for a specific program or need. You can see the revenue comes in. We've kind of modified this to just put it all in department operating expense, so that way it's a little bit easier to track where to spend that money out of. We'll be setting up projects to track each one of these different events that they have, though. So I'll scroll through all three of those. If you have any questions, please stop me. Then moving to the Equipment Acquisition and Replacement Fund. This is a place where we put away some money for different either equipment that we need to replace or new acquisitions that we want to do. You can see this year we've got about $250,000 coming in from the general fund. We've put all of that money into a reserve for a city hall project. We've got some money here in land, which, if I understand correctly, I really should rename, because I think that's to hopefully one day purchase the National Guard Armory building. That's pretty much on our maintenance site. And then we've got some funding for some other projects. If you want specifics, just please let me know.
Matt, when you're
Yes.
talking, when you say city hall project, is that for a new city hall or working
Yeah.
on the current city hall? So that's just kind of a pot of capital outlay, like a little stash.
Yes. So, and this is in a contingency or reserve, so that way we can't spend this money in the current fiscal year. It would have to go back to council for you guys to approve. But it is really for a future city hall building at some point in the future.
Thank you.
Yep. The Pioneer Cemetery Fund. Currently, the only thing coming in here is interest. And then if we need to do any projects, we can do that. We're also investigating on how this got set up. There's some confusion on if this is actually a trust fund or not. So we're going to be digging into this a little bit more throughout this next year and bring it back to you next year if we find anything different. We've got this Snedeker Trust Fund. So this was a library trust fund that we're going to move and combine with the library donation fund. As we've looked into most of these, they weren't actual trust funds. They were just labeled that way. They were donations with restrictions upon them. And so we've moved some of those out and are combining where we can. Then we get into the Street Capital Projects Fund. We're getting some county and some state grant funds. We've got some improvements that we're going to be making. I'm trying to remember right. They're listed out here what they are, if you want the detail. Any questions on that fund? Okay. Then we're going to move into an assortment of system development charge funds. So we've got two for each of our areas that we can charge them. So we've got storm drainage improvements or storm drainage, parks, wastewater, streets, and water. And so these are all for capital projects. The money comes in and we need to use that money to either repair some capital activities that we've done or provide new capital activities. And you can see on most of them, it's going to tell you what our plans for. So if you have any questions as I scroll through these, please let me know.
Question, Matt, do these funds and some of these projects fall under Jason and his competent team? Or are some of these go to contractors?
It's probably a combination depending on what the project is.
Mm-hmm.
So there will be some that Jason and his team might do, and there will be others that we hire contractors for. I mean, as we get to wastewater, this is all going to be used for the West Side Interceptor, so that's obviously going to be contracted out. But it just kind of depends on what projects are needed to be done.
Okay.
I know a lot of these like a traffic signal. I don't think Jason and his team do that kind of stuff. It's something that we would contract out. Are there any other questions on the SDC funds? And this just goes into some of the closed departments. So these are the old general fund departments that we closed 2 years ago. And then last year we closed a number of other departments that are, or other funds that we still have to keep in our budget for following state requirements. So until all the numbers go to 0. And then here's the authorized personnel schedule. And then we go into the department or the organizational charts and department organizational charts. But that is the City of Lebanon's 2021-22 proposed budget.
Thank you, Matt.
Matt, this is Virginia Cloyd. I have a question about the process with the American Rescue Funds.
Okay.
You're going to hear next week some details apparently from the Treasury Department, you said. So how will, and I know you have a placeholder in the general fund, so all these other funds that we saw, does that mean you can't transfer monies into the capital funds to spend out of the capital outlay funds, that it'll all have to be general fund funding?
Well, so there's a number of ways we could do it. What we'll likely do is we would do a budget transfer for both the revenue and the expense into the appropriate fund that we would want to spend that out of. And so as we determine what's eligible for us to spend the money on, we'll be working with City Council to determine kind of what the best project is. And at that point determine, okay, if that's what we're going to spend it on, then what budget adjustment would need to be made to spend that in the appropriate place.
Okay, so
So if it
the
was
budget
decided we were
committee
gonna-
will not be involved in that then?
Likely not. At this point, because I don't know that when we're going to know when we'll get that money actually.
Right. And the council has the authority then to reallocate any windfall funds like that.
They do, and they always have the ability to do a supplemental budget and move budget appropriations as long as they can do it under 10% without any public hearing. But if it goes over 10%, then there would be a public hearing to address that matter as well.
And that's 10% of what? The overall budget?
It'd be 10% of the budget within a fund if it was getting taken away.
Okay. So it's 18 million for the general fund. If you left it there and you went over 10%, then you'd have to have a hearing.
Well, because it's appropriated, it can probably be moved, but we would probably have a hearing anyways, just to make sure we have a good public comment. And really at all of our council meetings, we have the ability to have public comment. But I would definitely be looking into it and making sure we follow the state requirements on budget law, whether it's we have to have a public hearing in place. I know we would at least have to notice with our council meeting that we would be looking at the budget.
What if you don't spend it all in 1 year? Do they take it back?
They don't. Technically, the original plan that we've been told is we'll get half of it probably 90 days, so maybe at the very end of this fiscal year. And then a year from that, we'll get the other half of it. And so it's
believe-
likely that we won't spend the whole thing, but it's possible, depending on what projects we decide to use it for, that it could be kind of spent within next fiscal year.
I believe that the federal requirements are it has to be spent by the end of calendar 2024.
Oh, okay.
So it is something that I think they recognize. The broad guidelines in the American Rescue Plan are it can go for COVID costs, COVID related costs. It can replace lost revenue. And that's one we would look at is where have we lost revenue this year? And then really broadly, they're talking about water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure as the most likely projects. What we're waiting for at this point is the specific guidance from Treasury about fine details. So for example, we have a sizable sewer project that is ready to start construction pretty fast after the beginning of the fiscal year. But if the federal Treasury instructions are it's got to be a new project that wasn't already bid or already underway, we could not use any of the funding for that West Side Interceptor. And we would end up then in a different place in terms of planning for how to spend those resources. And that's really why we've put it in the general fund. Depending upon what the outcome is, if it's being used, for example, to replace lost revenue, there's really no appropriation issue. If we're replacing, say, lost revenue in the water fund, it would simply be, we would transfer the appropriations from non-departmental to an interfund transfer, but that would not require budget committee action to do. That would be within the purview of the council.
Okay.
If it's going, and I'll tell you, we have talked internally about potentially using some of that money for the West Side Interceptor to help us reduce borrowing, and that would then reduce upward pressure on sewer rates for customers. If we were to use some money for that project, again, it would be an interfund transfer, but the appropriations exist in their entirety today. So there would not be any supplementary budget actions required, for example, to create appropriations in the sewer fund. That makes sense.
Yes. Thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
Are there any further questions for Matt on the presentation? Hearing none, we'll move on to the public hearing portion, and we have two public hearings. I'm going to open the first at 1:38 p.m. and this is to discuss, and we'll need a motion to accept the state shared revenues.
I move to recommend the City of Lebanon Budget Committee accept state revenue sharing monies as non-dedicated revenue in the general fund.
We have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the state revenue sharing funds into the general fund as non-dedicated revenue. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries, and we will close that hearing at 1:40 p.m. I'll now open the hearing for the proposed City of Lebanon budget at 1:40 p.m. And we are here to recommend the property tax levy at the rate of $5.1364 of thousand of assessed value, and 1.632565 million for payment of bond principal and interest. So I would entertain a motion for the tax levy first.
I move for approval for the tax levy.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the budget committee to levy the permanent property tax rate of 5.1364 cents per thousand of assessed value for operating purposes and $1,632,565 for payment of bond principal and interest. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries. And now I would entertain a motion to accept or adopt the fiscal year 2021-22 budget in the sum of $73,574,190 as proposed by the city's budget officer.
So moved.
Second it.
It's been moved and seconded to accept to adopt, excuse me, the 2021-2022 budget. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries, and we'll close that hearing at 1:42. At this time, we're going to adjourn as the City of Lebanon Budget Committee and reconvene as the Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee. And first up on the agenda would be a presentation by Nancy Brewer, our interim city manager, of the fiscal year 2021-22 Lebanon Urban Renewal Agency budgets.
Oh, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the meeting. I don't have a lot to say here. You heard me say we do have $40,000 in for the North Gateway to study some modifications to that. That would be work that would come back to the council later. And other than that, the funds really are all in balance, and they are all paying the required principal and interest debt payments for the funds that have debt, or the direct payments where that's required. I don't think we need to go through each urban renewal district budget, but certainly we are happy to answer any questions that you might have about them. Otherwise, if you don't have a lot of questions, I think you can move to the motions.
Then we have questions about the urban renewal district taxes for Nancy.
Nancy, how much of the Fifth Street was planning to be a part of that
So
North Gateway?
It's 2 blocks. The first 2 blocks north of Tangent are not in the North Gateway URD, but the 2 blocks farther north are. And all 4 blocks need to be repaved. So this would be a plan to look at whether we could add that additional space, and then probably include the 5th and Tangent intersection to address what we expect at some point here is a need for a more robust intersection to make it easier for pedestrians to cross. And whether that's a stoplight or something that's going to fall to Ron and work that he's got coming, probably not immediately, but in a few years. So that would be the addition. It's just 2 blocks of 5th Street.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions for Nancy? Okay, this time I'm going to open the public hearing we have to go through this for each one of these 5. So first, we're going to open the public hearing for the Northwest Lebanon URD at 1:44 p.m. and I'll entertain a motion.
Move to recommend the Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee approve the Northwest Lebanon URD taxes for fiscal year 2021-2022 at the tax increment value of $60 million.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded to recommend that the URD Budget Committee approve the URD for 2021-2022 the tax increment value of $60 million. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries, and we'll close that public hearing at 1:45. We will open the next public hearing at 1:45, and I'll entertain a motion regarding the Cheetah Lake URD.
I move to recommend the Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee approve the Cheetah Lake URD taxes for fiscal year 2021-2022 at the rate of 100% of the amount from the Division of Tax.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the Cheetah Lake URD taxes for fiscal year 21-22 at the rate of 100% of the amount from the Division of Tax. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries, and we'll close the hearing at 1:46. We'll open the next hearing at 1:46, and this is for the North Gateway URD, and I'll entertain a motion.
I move to recommend the Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee approve the North Gateway URD tax for fiscal year 2021-2022 at the rate of 100% of the amount from the Division of Tax.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the North Gateway URD taxes for fiscal year 2021, 2022 at the rate of 100% of the amount of the division of tax. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries, and we'll close the hearing at 1:46 p.m. We'll open the next hearing at 1:46 p.m. for the downtown URD, and I'll entertain a motion.
I move to recommend the Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee approve the downtown URD taxes for fiscal year 2021, 2022 at the rate of 100% of the amount from the division of tax.
Second it.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the downtown URD taxes for 2021, 2022 at the rate of 100% of the amount from the division of tax. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. We'll close that hearing at 1:47 p.m. And we'll open the final hearing at 1:47 p.m. for the mill race URD for taxes. I'll entertain a motion.
I move to recommend the Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee approve the mill race URD taxes for fiscal year 2021, 2022 at the rate of 100% of the amount from the division of tax.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the mill race URD taxes for fiscal year 21-22 at the rate of 100% of the amount from the division of tax. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, and we'll close that public hearing at 1:47. Thank you, everyone. Moving on, we have the total proposed urban renewal budget, and I will entertain a motion.
I move to recommend the Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee adopt the fiscal year 2021, 2022 Lebanon Urban Renewal Agency budget in the sum of $6,118,857 as proposed by the agency budget office.
Second it.
Been moved and seconded to adopt the fiscal year 2021-22 Lebanon URD agency budget in the sum of $6,118,857 as proposed by the budget officer. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. And we will now adjourn as the Lebanon Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee and reconvene as the City of Lebanon Budget Committee. And this pretty much wraps up our business. Are there any comments from the committee at this time?
Are you talking about comments from regarding the budget or just general comments?
Just general comments.
Is this a time for a general comment? Okay, so it was interesting to me that about 3 weeks ago, Baker City, in response to the latest of the schizophrenic directives from the governor's office, issued an emergency statement exempting themselves from the governor's emergency statements.
Lance,
And what's that?
what comments in this arena are going to be limited to those that are on the agenda?
Okay, that's what I was kind of asking.
Yeah.
If this is a good time for just a general comment.
Yeah, this is the budget committee meeting, not
Okay.
city
Yeah, I
council.
thought we'd adjourned that, so my apologies.
Nope. Okay, we do not have a need for another budget committee meeting. I wanted to thank everyone for their time. I really wanted to thank Nancy and all of staff for their extreme efforts to put together a budget in a very tough year, a very tough couple of years. These folks do an amazing job for our city. They are so communicative with the council and with our staff. It just makes this process so much easier. Matt, thank you for your work and putting this together for us, getting us the
Yes.
documents and putting
Yes.
time. And then to each and every one of you department directors that are on here, I know the council appreciates you all so much. And I can understand how the budget committee as well appreciates all of you, even Trey. Thanks for being there, Trey. Nancy, do you have any closing words?
I would like to say thank you to all of you for your participation and attendance. Budget, I know it's not everybody's thing, even though it's mine. I do appreciate the department directors and the work that they have done to pull this budget together and to provide support to me. And frankly, to Matt and to the accounting manager, Casey Headley, who have had to put up with me driving a whole lot of change in the budget this year. And they have taken it on well. And I think are enjoying this opportunity. So thank you all. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, everybody. With that, we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.